Erev Tov. Collateral damage. I don't know if you got to see the Maramakomos. I don't think we'll get to do all of them tonight. Maybe we'll have a two-part series. We'll see how it goes. And tonight we'll focus on 4 of the commentaries in Parshas Vayishlach. We're going to try to see if we could extrapolate from those 4 commentaries some sort of conclusion about our situation today. And let's just give a simple definition of collateral damage. Now, collateral damage is a word, a phrase from international law. I'm not an international lawyer. But basically, as you might see in the footnote on the first page, and I'll just read it to you, it's where combatants, right, so they're not in combat, are unintentionally killed or wounded as a result of the attack on legitimate military targets. So it's obvious that collateral means there's a military target, a definite target, and inadvertently, what happens is that people who are not involved in combat against this particular military power, nevertheless, they get injured or killed. And as you know, this is always an issue against Israel, that we are killing Palestinians who are not part of the combat, they're not Hamasniks, and so forth and so on. But I think what we want to accomplish is to get a picture of what the Halacha would say about this. And the interesting thing is that many of the poskim, when they deal with this issue, will refer to this parsha in Bereishis Lamed Daled of Bnei Yaakov, meaning of Shimon v'Levi. And the Torah tells us that, we'll read some of the psukim inside, that Chamor, it says here, Vateitze Dina bas Leah shayolda liYaakov l'ros bibnos ha'aretz vayar osa Shchem ben Chamor. So you have Chamor is like the president or the king, and you have a son, his son named Shchem. And Shchem sees Dina, Vayishkav osa vayaneha, and etc., the whole episode that ensues. Now, as you know, the Torah doesn't hide any words over here, any stories here, and is very open about the fact that Shimon v'Levi tricked the people of Shechem into the Bris Milah, and then as a result, they wiped out the entire city of Shechem, at least all the male members of Shechem. And the first issue that we want to deal with is whether or not Shimon and Levi were justified in what they did. Is there any halachic justification? Because at the face of it, we would say that Shechem is guilty of the crime. Perhaps we can throw Chamor in because he will also be, in a sense, a partner in crime, as we'll see. But the rest of the city of Shechem would seem to be what we call non-combatants, combatants, right? So that what we want to know is, on the one hand, what motivated Shimon and Levi to do such a thing? They are called tzaddikim. And on the other hand, why did they incur such a very harsh criticism from Father Jacob? And that criticism appears in 2 different parshios. It's actually split, because if you look here in Parshas Vayishlach, you will find Vayomer Yaakov el Shimon vel Levi achartem osi lavisheni biyoshev haaretz v'aknani v'aprizi v'ani mesei mispar v'nesfu alai v'ikuni v'shmadeti ani ubeisi. So that's the very harsh criticism at the time of the episode, or shortly thereafter. And then, when we get to Parshas Vayechi, and Yaakov is bestowing the blessings on his various sons, when it comes to Shimon and Levi, he curses them with a very harsh klola, and achalka b'Yisrael, and he's mefazer them throughout Israel. So again, getting back to that first question, which is addressed by the Rambam in a sort of indirect way. You didn't expect that from left field in Perek Tes Mihilchas Malachim, when the Rambam is addressing the issue of Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and the punishment if a Ben Noach is guilty of violating one of the Sheva Mitzvahs and is condemned in a court. And in the middle of that presentation, the Rambam sort of by and by addresses the issue of Shimon v'Levi. So let's read the Rambam inside. Keitzad mitzuvin hein al adinim. We have in Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach two blocks, so to speak, or two categories. We have 6 mitzvahs which are negative mitzvahs, which are losa says, and then we have one essay, and that's dinim. And the Rambam sees a direct relationship between dinim and the other 6. And therefore, Keitzad mitzuvim hein al dinim, chayovim lahoshiv dayanim v'shoftim b'chol pelach u'pelach. Again, every word in the Rambam comes under criticism here, but that's not for us. Ladun, they will condemn the accused b'sheish mitzvahs elu. So it means that if one of the Bnei Noach will violate one of the 6 lotases, then the mitzvah dinim will be activated to condemn a Ben Noach after proving that he's guilty of violating one of the 6 mitzvahs. And they play a role, sort of like a leadership role, to warn the people. Because a Ben Noach she'avar al achas mi sheva mitzvahs. Now let's underline the word sheva mitzvahs elu, yeharig b'sayif. Now when I emphasize the word sheva, I'm including in that number dinim itself. So not only, says the Rambam, are they condemned to death if they violate one of the 6 lotases, but even if they violate the mitzvahs aseh of dinim, then that itself will incur a capital punishment of sayif. And in that sense, the Rambam is a warrior, again, fighting a battle against other Rishonim who say that, including the Ramban, who say that there's a mitzvah of dinim, but the violation of dinim is not something that would incur a chiyuv misa, a chiyuv sayif, because the chiyuv sayif can only be generated by a violation of a lav, and in this case, a lotas of one of the 6. But the Rambam is of the opinion that even the 7th, which is a mitzvah aseh of dinim, comes under the same category as the other 6, and a violation of dinim, or shall we call it a non-fulfillment of dinim, will incur a capital punishment. Here's where the Rambam comes in from left field. Nischayvu kol balei Shechem hariga. Every last member of the city of Shechem was chayav misa. Why? What were they guilty of? Sharei Shechem gazal. Okay, this is another chiddush of the Rambam. The Rambam holds that although in a case of a married woman, a relationship with a married woman, we call it adultery, would be one of the 6 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. But in a case of an unmarried woman, although it doesn't come under arayos, but nevertheless it comes under gezel, a big chiddush of the Rambam. And many Rishonim question this. What are you talking about gezel? I mean, this is not gezel. He didn't kidnap her. He had a relationship with her, but not. But that's the Rambam Shita. The Rambam is of the opinion that when Shechem takes Dinah, he abducts her for the purpose of having a relationship. That is gezel. And what judgment did he get for that? By the other Bnei Noach in the city of Shechem? Nothing. Shechem Gazal, Heim Ra'u V'Yadu. Ra'u means some were even apparently spectators, I don't know. And others didn't see the actual act. So you had one witness who saw it, but you had the entire city that knew about it. It became public knowledge because, as you know, Tamar would approach Yaakov and try to establish some sort of bris, a covenantal relationship, and this was public knowledge. And the brothers would say, well, in response to this, let's see if we can set up a bris milah, and you'll be part of us, we'll be part of you, we'll be one nation, and we'll intermarry, and so forth and so on. So the whole city was aware of what went on here, according to the Rambam at least, with Shechem and Dinah. V'lo danu. And they failed to judge him, to condemn him. They didn't bring him to justice. And therefore, they were chayiv misa. The Ramban immediately attacks the Rambam. This is the Ramban in his commentary on Chumash. And he says the following: I'm not the only one to raise this objection of how the Bnei Yaakov Avinu, Shimon and Levi could have possibly, these holy men could have possibly been guilty of wiping out a city of innocent people. Eich asu Bnei Yaakov tzadikim ha'maisa zeh lishpol dam noki. V'arav. Now the Ramban quotes the Rambam. Heishiv shebnei Noach mitzuvim al adinim. V'hula hoshiv dayon b'chol pelach u'pelach lodun b'sheish mitzvos shalahem. U'ben Noach sha'over al achas mehem hu nerag b'sayif. Ra echad sha'over al achas mehem v'lo danu. You are aware of the fact that so-and-so, Ben Noach, was in violation of one of the 6 los hases, and they didn't judge him. He was not judged. Harei haroa yeharig b'sayif. Umipnei zeh nischayvu kol bali shchem ariga sharei shchem gazal heim ro v'yod v'lo danu. So his quote of the Rambam is a little bit different than ours, but the gist of it is exactly what we saw in the Rambam. And the upshot is that the Bnei Shechem were all guilty because they were aware of the Gezel and the violation of one of the other 6 Averos of Bnei Noach, and Lo Danu. Lo Danu. Now, just to give you a preview of what we're going to see in the Ramban doesn't address the question of whether or not the Jewish nation is responsible to condemn and to punish the nations of the world. And if the Rambam is implying that Shimon and Levi were carrying out the punishment that was appropriate for the Bnei Shechem, then that's an interesting question. Does the Rambam assume that we are the watchtowers, for the nations of the world? The Jewish people have some sort of responsibility. We're not part of the nation of the Canaanim. Let them work it out themselves. Are we going to go around killing all the Rishonim in the world? Is that our obligation? We're going to condemn them because of dinim, because they didn't set up a justice system and bring evidence and try and condemn those sinners? That's a question that gnaws at our mind. And I say this as an introduction to the Ramban. The Ramban is going to attack the Rambam first and foremost on a different level. He says the following: Let's underline 2 words here: Zoche and Kodem, right? And we have a principle of Kol HaKodem Zocha. Yaakov Avinu should have been the Kodem. Yaakov Avinu shouldn't have left an opportunity to fulfill an obligation of this sort to let it slip through his fingers. Why didn't Yaakov get involved in this campaign to destroy the city of Shechem? If, according to the Rambam, Shimon and Levi stood up and they did that work, why give it to Shimon and Levi? Yaakov should have been the initiator. V'im pachad mihem, you might say that Yaakov was afraid of the city of Shechem. He didn't have the courage to go ahead and do this. And again, the support to that would be what Yaakov himself says in a few psukim down the line, Lama acharto mosi lavisheni, and they'll rise up against me. So maybe Yaakov was afraid of the repercussions of doing this. He says, okay, so you're telling me that really Yaakov, according to the Rambam, should have taken the initiative. He should have done exactly what the Bnei Yaakov did. Okay, there was a technical reason, a ma'akev, a block. He couldn't overcome his fear of the repercussions of doing such an action. But then, Loma Kas al Banav. So why does he get angry at his children? The Rambam could somehow wiggle his way out of the question why Yaakov wasn't Kodev V'Zocha, because of his pachad. But what's the Rambam going to say about the fact that Yaakov gets angry, comes down very hard on Shimon and Levi? Orar Apam, he curses their anger. Acher Kamas Manin. Okay, so he's now jumping up ahead to Parshas Vayechi. So in other words, if you only had the response of Yaakov Avinu in Parshas Vayishlach, you could still defend the Rambam and say that Yaakov Avinu was not criticizing their actions. Yaakov Avinu himself would have supported that campaign, and he would have put to death the Bnei Shechem. But it's lamachartamosi. It's a problem of pikuach nefesh. Even if you have an obligation, but the obligation doesn't require you to put your life into danger, then what are you going to do with Yaakov's response to this whole episode in Parshas Vayechi, where Yaakov comes down so hard, Orur apam kiyaz, etc., etc. V'anasosam v'chilka v'fitzam b'Yisrael. He separates them and spreads them out. Halohem zachu, they weren't afraid of the repercussions if they would wipe out the Shechem. They weren't afraid of the Canaanim. So they had a greater level of achievement than Yaakov did. Yaakov was in fear. They were not in fear. And they, like warriors with courage, and without any second thoughts, they went in there to do what had to be done. Halohem zachu v'yasu mitzvah. They weren't worried about the repercussions. They relied on Hashem. We're doing the mitzvah. Hashem will protect us, which he actually did. And yet, Yaakov Avinu comes down very hard on them. Yaakov Avinu should have given them a tzalash. Yaakov obviously was not in favor of doing what they did. There's no obligation on their part to go forward and wipe out the city of Shechem. That's not your business. It's none of your business. Okay, then we're back to square one. Are we saying now that the Ramban basically accepts the fundamental premise of the Rambam, and Yaakov was willing to justify the actions of Shimon v'Levi, and what stopped him from taking the lead on this and taking the initiative was pachad? And for some reason, which we don't know why, it's the responsibility of Yaakov, Beis Yaakov, of Shimon and Levi to mete out punishment to the Bnei Noach for violating dinim. So where does that responsibility emanate from? And even if I grant you there is such a responsibility, why then does Yaakov get angry at them and curse them? So on the one hand, the Ramban is going to have to agree that at some level, in some stage, the Bnei Shechem were chayiv misa, because otherwise Shimon and Levi are just a bunch of rotzchen. And the Ramban is going to agree with the Rambam that they were justified to some extent in putting these people to death. But on the other hand, they deserve to be punished, and Yaakov is going to take them to task. And the Ramban now is facing a very delicate operation here when he has to juggle between two polar extremes. On the one hand, to justify what the Ramban is going to call hutar damam, in other words, to take the lives of the Bnei Shechem, and at the same time, to justify Yaakov Avinu's great and heavy musar with a klal attached to it, anger at Shimon and Levi. So the Ramban has a very formidable task in front of him. And he writes the following. Aval inyan Shechem ki bnei Yaakov bavur shahayu anshe Shechem rishayim. Now this is the previous Ramban, which we didn't do tonight, in which the Ramban says that the Canaanim were guilty of the most hideous crimes. They violated Avodah Zarah. and they violated Ritzicha, and they were guilty of Arayas, left, right, and center, of Mishkav Zachar, homosexuality, everything, you name it. And the Knanim, and especially the people in Shechem, were guilty of all these Averas. So forget about the fact that they took Dinah, irrelevant or regardless of that, independent that they were Rishayim. And therefore, Damam Chashiv Lem Kemayim. They could be killed because they're Rishayim. Not because of the violation of Dinah, but because of the violation of all the mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Okay, so what does that mean? We're moving closer to the Rambam, except the Rambam says that they were guilty of sort of being, complacent about the Gezel of Shechem, the Ma'aseh Dinah, and that itself is a violation of Dinah, and therefore they deserve to die. The Ramban, for his part, says they deserve to die because they're shown for all the 6 Averos of Bnei Noach. But keep in mind that the Ramban is not going to tell us that because they were Rishoyim and Domam is Kemayim, therefore Shimon and Levi were justified in going in and killing them. Because again, the Ramban still has this very annoying problem. What business is it to you? Why are you, as Bnei Yaakov, responsible to go ahead and do judgment and implement the death penalty for every guy that violates the Zion Mitzvah Bnei Noach? And here's where the Ramban introduces a concept called Nekama. So again, let's understand. You've got on one side of the equation the Rishayim who deserve to be killed. On the other side of the equation, you have the Bnei Yaakov, and it's none of their business to mete out punishment to the Rishayim of the Umos HaOlam. What is going to be the bridge that's going to tick off the response of Shimon and Levi to get involved in putting to death the Rishayim, the sinners who deserve to die? Why does it become their inyan? And those are the next 2 words, Li'nake mehen. So Ramban is introducing a concept called Nekama. And what is Nekama? He says, Becherev no kemes. The Ramban is always paraphrasing phrases from the Tanakh. And basically, what the Ramban is saying now is that even though it's none of your business to punish the sinners of the Knanim, but nevertheless, they were anxious to avenge the abuse of Dinah. How could you abuse our sister Dinah? She's pure, she's holy. And therefore, they decided to take Nekama against anyone who had not only actively violated Dinah, but also to anyone who, shall we say, were followers and supporters of those who violated Dinah. So I'm going to use those 2 words right now, followers and supporters, because I think that's going to be very relevant to our current situation in collateral damage. Says the Ramban, V'hargu HaMelech, Melech is a reference to Chamor, V'chol Anshe Iro, the entire city of Shechem, Ki avodav heim v'sarim el mashmat shalom. I think what the Ramban is saying here, although I can't take a shvu on this, is that the entire city of Shechem were backers compliant to the rulership of Shechem, of Chamor and Shechem. Again, I'm not happy with these words of the Ramban. I honestly, Sarim el Mashma'ato, I don't know if that does it for me. We'll see soon, Rav Shimshon Hirsch. I think he does a much better job here at this point. But somehow you have to assume in the Ramban, without pinpointing the words and the translations of every word in the Ramban, that the city of Shechem is like a circle associated with their leader, with their melech. And maybe we could go one step further in the Ramban, and he means to imply, although he doesn't say it outright, that they supported the king. So again, what's going to trigger off the response of Shimon Levi? Nekama. Why did the Bnei Shechem deserve to die? Because they're Rishonim. Verhutar damam kemayin. But once the Bnei Yaakov get involved in any part of the destruction of the people of Shechem, in this case, those to whom the vengeance was most severe, the Nekama was to those Hakizona Tasas Achachosedu, Memela, that allows them to get involved. It's like, once you start a mitzvah, you finish a mitzvah. The Ascholas HaMitzvah was the Nekama against those who perpetrated the crime, but now, since Hutar Damam, they can expand their activities in a campaign to destroy the entire city of Shechem. But wait a second. And this is, I think, implicit in the next line of the Ramban. He doesn't spell it out. But didn't they enter into a bris? Didn't Shimon HaLevi propagate a bris? And a bris is almost like a conversion. And we know that a guy who accepts Sheva Mitzvah Bnei Noach has the status of a Ger Toshav. We also know that there's a principle of Ger HaMisgayer Kekatan Shenolad Dami. So when you are guilty of crimes as a Ben Noach, and we discussed this at great length where we learned Perek Ben Tzorah Morer, through conversion, you basically start from scratch. It's the greatest act of tshuva Kekatan Shenolad Dami. And therefore, according to Ramban, that they deserve to die. How could Shimon say they deserve to? How could Shimon and Levi say they deserve to die when they underwent gerus, when they're willing to become part of the bris with Klal Yisrael? They had a different shita, Shimon and Levi. Ein bris asher nimola nechshav b'neim. The Bnei Yaakov didn't consider that bris to be worth a dime. L'ma'uma, it's not worth ma'uma at all. So why did the people of Shechem agree to the circumcision? It was all part of their, sarul mashmas and chinfu es hamelech. If Shechem and Chamor wanted them to enter into the bris, fine, we'll do it because of in the framework of our relationship of Hanifa, of being subservient. So now the Ramban has to go back and explain Yaakov Avinu. Because now we're saying that we understand full well why Shimon and Levi took the initiative and got involved in something that l'chorah is not any of their business, because of the Nekama. The bris itself was worth nothing. It didn't signify anything. These were Rishayim. And once you start the Pu'ulat Nekama, then why not finish the job, wipe out all of the supporters of that kingdom, of the king, who are Rishayim anyway, and they deserve to die. So Yaakov says, you know what? You endangered our lives. Meaning that Yaakov is basically admitting he is actually not contesting the fact that Shimon and Levi killed those who deserve to die. They deserve the death penalty, but not at the expense of putting us into danger. And that's Yaakov Avinu's response, as we say in Yiddish, af and art, meaning immediately, because right now you have destroyed the city of Shechem. The Canaanim are going to come and they're going to hunt us down. It wasn't worth it all for our lives to be wiped out just because of Nakama, etc., etc. So that's Bekan. I would underline the word Bekan. Ki evi'u b'sakana shenemar achartem osi lavishen. Visham. What does the word Visham refer to? Parshas Vayechi. Orur apam. Why? Why are they cursed? I mean, you just said that Yaakov didn't contest against them. The people of Shechem were deserving of death. There was a Pulas Nakama. And now the Ramban sings a different tune entirely. Ki asu chamas li anshe ha'ir. This was a cruelty to the people of Shechem. Sha'amru b'nei Yaakov said, Lahem v'mamado v'yashavnu itchem v'hayinu lam echad. The b'nei Yaakov, when they appeal to the people of Shechem to be circumcised, they say, well, we're going to all be one nation. We're going to intermarry. Vehem, the Ramban is guilty of using too many pronouns here, but Vehem means the Bnei Shechem, Hayu bocharim bahem. They would choose Jewish girls to get married to. There would be intermarriage. Ubatchu b'dibura. And they relied on the story, pardon the expression, the malarkey that Shimon and Levi was selling them. It was just a foolishness. It was all a ploy. And now the Ramban goes a step further. And he's going to build on the Bris Milah. And he's going to say that Yaakov Avinu had a different perspective on the Bris Milah of Anshe Shechem than the Bnei Yaakov, than Shimon and Levi. Ulai, Yashuvu el Hashem. And therefore, V'hargu Osomchim, Ki lo heru lehem klal. So I was perplexed here by what I saw as an inami in the Ramban. What was the response of Yaakov to the Bnei, to Shimon and Levi? First he says, sakana. So I understood from that the Ramban is saying that if not for sakana, Yaakov Avinu embraced the same position as Shimon and Levi, and what they did was justified. And Yaakov is not contesting that. They were Rishayim, they deserved to die. There was Nakama, take the Pulas Nakama, and wipe out all those who are part of the Mishmat of Chamar and Shechem. But then the Ramban says, no. It's almost as if Yaakov Avinu had time to think this out. And by the time he was at the end of his life, he was ready to bestow the blessings on the Bnei Yaakov, on the Shvatim. All of a sudden it dawned to him that maybe it wasn't such a good idea, even if there wasn't a sakana, and that for two reasons. Number one, because lo heru lehem klal, we'll underline those last four words in the Ramban. In other words, the Bnei Shechem did not perpetrate any crimes against Yaakov or Dinah. And number two, because they might have done tshuva. Give them a chance to do tshuva. These Rishonim. And number three, okay, I called it two, but now I realize it's three. And number three, because this was not a morally ethical action on the part of the Bnei Yaakov to trick and fool the Bnei Shechem into this whole ploy in order to wipe them all out. V'heim batchu bam. Batchu b'dibur. So again, I'm telling you now, Rabbosai, maybe you have a better understanding of the Ramban. Please share it with me. It seems to me that the Ramban is kind of posef al shnei seifim when he talks about the immediate response of Yaakov following the wiping out of the entire city of Shechem. It sounds like Yaakov was on board. The thought process and the action of Shimon and Levi was justified to some extent, if not for sakana, because these were Rishonim that deserved to die anyway. We were just asking why get involved. It's none of your damn business. And the answer is Nakama, because we will take Nakama and now we'll meet it out against the entire city. But then the Ramban has a whole about face when he gets to Parshas Vayechi. Now he has a triple-pronged or maybe a quadruple-pronged attack to prove and establish that Shimon and Levi were wrong in what they did. Haim lo herolem, they attacked people who weren't guilty in any sense. Maybe they would have done tshuva. You fooled them. They naively relied on you because you're trustworthy, honest people. How could you have done such an action? Which means that even if there was no sakon, Yaakov would still be upset, angry, and opposed to what they did. So on the one hand, I understand what's bothering the Ramban because he's trying to figure out the two different responses of Yaakov, the first original one and the one at the end of his life. The first one is, okay, don't get me involved in sakana. And the second one is when he really comes down hard with a klola of orur, apam, etc., which indicates that it wasn't just an issue of sakana. How exactly the Ramban reconciles those two is not clear to me. The Maral Prague on this parsha is going to introduce a new concept into the fray that was neither mentioned by the Rambam nor by the Ramban. And what is that? Says the Maral in his famous commentary on Rashi on the Chumash, "She'eino doma shnei umos, kigon bnei Yisrael v'knanim shem shnei umos lefichach huto lehem lilchom kidin uma sheba lilchom al uma cheres." What concept does the Maral Prague introduce here into this whole sugya of Shimon and Levi? Anyone?
Milchama.
The Rambam wasn't talking about Milchama. The Rambam was talking about violating dinim. And since the Bnei Shechem were guilty of violating dinim or non-fulfillment of dinim, therefore they would deserve to die. The Rambam doesn't address the question why Yaakov didn't take this mitzvah upon himself first. He doesn't address the question as to why the Bnei Yaakov shouldn't be minding their own business. But no mention of Milchama. This is a private matter. Shimon and Levi took it as a private initiative. The Ramban also doesn't mention the word Milchama. The Ramban is only interested in Nakama. Nakama is between one person and another, or one family and another. It's not Ummah against an Ummah. And therefore, the Maral Prague is introducing an element into the equation which is going to radically change our entire perspective of what went on over there, and basically to introduce what we call collateral damage in a military campaign. Because the Maral Prague recognizes that Shimon and Levi were at war against another nation, a nation of Canaanim. And when it's Ummah against Ummah, there's no such thing as collateral damage. There's no such thing as saying, well, unintentionally you killed so-and-so who was innocent. Doesn't exist. The Maral Prague, within the context of Milchama, rejects the whole Havamina, so to speak, the whole concept of of collateral damage. Let's read it inside. He says, the Torah allowed you to go out and battle against another nation. And now the Maharal Miprag has to ask himself the question, well, shouldn't there have been some compassion? Is there a basis for compassion in a military campaign? I want to, just for one moment, just fast forward to Rav Shlomo Goren, which you'll see on number 12 if you have it. Rav Shlomo Goren writes that af mitzvahs halachima, even in the mitzvah of milchama, etc., mitzuvim anu lachus, we are obligated by Torah law, gam lachus gam ala oyev. We have to have compassion for our enemy. Shalo laharog afilu b'shas milchama. That which you need and it's absolutely necessary for the milchama, that's one thing. That's a mitzvah milchama. But without any compassion on the people, oh no. Says Rav Shlomo Goren, v'lo lifga b'chlusiyah bilti lo chemes. Collateral damage. And when I look at the Maharal, I see that as a havamina, but he rejects it. He says, "V'af al gav sha'omer Torah ki tikra v'la'ir li lachem el v'karasa elel l'shalom." Give them an opportunity to go away, to wave the white flag. We offered you a corridor. Go south. The birds fly south in the winter. And here the Maharal gives an answer, which I think is pure, like conceptual lumbus, but you got to cut this with a sharp razor. He says, Hainu, when do we apply the mitzvah of lachus, of having some element of compassion? B'makom shelo asu liyisrael dov. If no member of that nation has perpetrated any crime, they are completely guiltless. From A to Z, the entire nation is guiltless. If the nation has initiated some sort of evil against us, and we have I'm looking for an English word, a gripe against them. What's the word I'm looking for? Can anybody help me here? We have a
vendetta.
What's the word?
Vendetta.
Grievance.
A grievance. Excellent.
Grievance.
Who said it? Moshe? Yechiel? Who said it? If we have a grievance against them, then this whole idea of a karasa leil shalom does not apply. Kigon zeh, like this exact case of Shechem ben Chamor, shepartzu bahem lasos lem nevola. Again, it's one, pardon the expression, Yotzel Flotza, by the name of Shechem, who perpetrated an evil against us. We have a grievance. And our grievance, says Maharal, is against the entire nation. It allows us to go to battle in Milchama, a Milchama without Vikarasa Leil Shalom, because they initiated. So if you have, let's say, for example, Milchemes Rishus, which is instigated and initiated by a Jewish king to expand the boundaries of Israel, whatever, or to get money in Shalal, whatever it is, then Vikarasa Leil Shalom. Don't surround them on all four sides. Give them one side. Let them go out that one side. The Afagav, the Maharal is aware of our inhibition. Lo asavak echad mehem. So the Maharal says that all the faces of a nation are like one and the same. They're all identical. It's like, for example, the Chinese don't understand that, us Caucasians look differently one from the other. We don't understand how the Asians look different from other. They all look the same. And he's saying that if one individual member of Ummah X will perpetrate a crime against Ummah Y, then Ummah Y is in a situation where X initiated the and now created a grievance. It was one person who initiated and perpetrated this crime. I mean, this is a whole nother concept here. This reminds me of the whole parsha of Achan. You remember he took from the Shalal, and at the Battle of Ai, we lost, I don't remember, 36 soldiers. It's Kevan Shepartzah and Tchila. Emphasize the word Tchila. The Pirza here was theirs Tchila. They took the initiative, then Mutarim Likach Nikmasam. You see here, the Maral changes his lexicon and he uses the word Nekama instead of the word Milchama. But I think he means that this is a Milchama of Nekama. But it's a Milchama nevertheless. And what generates the mitzvah of Milchama? It's the fact that we are going one against the other. Why don't we have to offer them a piecemeal, a peace possibility? Because they initiated some evil and perpetrated. Who did it? One person. But he represents the entire Ummah. Once we establish a Milchama, it's Ummah against Ummah. Now, I would have to assume, unless you want to debate me on this, that those mamzerim, pardon the expression, the Hamasniks, I hate to even say the word, they are part of the same Ummah as the Palestinians. The population of Gaza is not made up of two different Ummahs. And therefore, I'm tempted to think, and David, you told me that somebody already pointed this out based on this Maral. I was unaware of that according to the Maral Miprag, we're fighting a battle against the Ummah. And if you're fighting a battle against the Ummah, and only one person of that Ummah perpetrated a crime, nevertheless, you don't even have to be Posech B'Shalom, you can destroy the entire Ummah. Kevan Shahayu Be'osa Ummah Sha'asa Ralahem, Mutarim Lavalem B'Milchama, V'chein Heim Kol Milchamas. So again, let's just review. Whereas the Ramban is saying, that, Shimon Velevi, who gave you the job and the responsibility to take Nekama when this is going to, first of all, endanger our lives. Secondly, there are those who are guiltless. And thirdly, when you fooled them and they trusted you and they did a bris milah, maybe they do tshuva, the whole debate here between Shimon and Levi on the one hand, Yaakov on the other hand, is about Nekama. Is there a justification to initiate implementing the law and condemning and executing the sinners, the violators of Sheva Mitzvah Noach, based on Nekama that would allow me to go in and now condemn to death all the Bnei Noach who were in violation? And even if it wasn't a matter of sakana, Yaakov Avinu is saying, hold on a second. You want to take Nekama? Then take Nekama against those who are guilty. But Lohura Lehem Klal, but the Bnei Shechem did not do anything against you to harm you. And here's where the Maral jumps ship, and the Maral says, you know what? You have no right to say, as the Ramban would have it in Yaakov Avinu's perspective, that we don't take Nekama because of the action of one individual when all the others, Lohura Lehem Klal, and it's Bechinam. No. Says the Maral, we're in a war. We're in a Milchama situation. It could be that the Ramban did not understand or accept the premise that you can call a Milchama when there's no nation really. The nation of Israel has not yet really evolved. The Knanim are a nation. But do we have the status of an Ummah at the time of the Bnei Yaakov, and we can declare war? Is there a mitzvah and a din Milchama before the Torah was given? The first Milchama was against Amalek. But there was no din of Milchama before Amalek. I think that's what the Ramban would argue. The Maral is not impressed with that. The Maral is saying there was Avram, there was Yitzchak, there was Yaakov, there are the Shvatim, and the nation of Israel has emerged as a viable ummah with a mitzvah milchama. The Ramban is talking about Nekama. The Maral is talking about milchama. Yeah, I'm sorry. David, you wanted to say something?
I forgot where it was. I saw it a long time ago. There was an essay in what's it called? What's that? What the Summit? What's the
Tchumin.
Tchumin. It's Tchumin by Itziel Ariel or something. One of the Dayanim, I think, is a Dayan in Karen Arba or something on collective punishment, and he quotes the Maral there, I think.
Because we have Tchumin here on the bottom of page 3 in Rav Lior's presentation. Oh, yeah, also Rav Ariel. That's number 16.
Yes.
Have that?
Right.
So that's Tchumin.
So in that whole essay, I think he quotes the Maral. I seem to, I don't know, this I read about 8-9 years ago, so I don't remember exactly. I gave a talk on.
All right. Well, we'll see in Mitzvah, the bottom line of their articles in Tchumin. I don't know if we'll get to that tonight. Because what I really wanted to spend, although I see it's getting late, a lot of time on is Rav Shimshon Hirsch.
Right. But that's collective punishment and collateral damage are a bit different. Because collective punishment is the chachila. That's what the Maral is saying.
So there's no issue of collateral damage because if we're fighting against the entire ummah, then collectively,
it's not collateral. It's
right. We have to destroy that ummah in the context of milchama, and we don't even go out and ask for peace. He's saying. So the whole idea of ki tikra v'ir lilachem alev v'karasa shalom, that's because they didn't initiate a battle. But if they initiated a battle against us, and again, it's only a grievance against one person. The Maral is very revolutionary on many different counts. Number one is premise that this is a milchama before the first milchama in Jewish history, and the Bnei Yaakov have the status of an ummah that can declare war. Number two, the fact that once you're battling against an ummah, then does the mitzvah of being posach b'shalom apply or not? Says the Maral, it depends who initiated. And if one, and here's the biggest chiddush of the Maral, if one individual member of that ummah initiated a nevola, a pirza against Klal Yisrael, that is room for us to destroy the ummah in a milchama without being posach b'shalom. That's the most radical, I think, chiddush of the Maral. And I think
isn't it Das Yochid? Is it Das Yochid? No?
I think we're going to see, again, we're going to see in the poskim, in the contemporary authors, that there are like reverberations or echoes of the Maral in what they're saying, that it's ummah against ummah. But I'm very interested in learning with you, Rav Shimshon Hirsch. Now, I want to thank David for sending me the English translation. But I have to tell you honestly, okay, my father never let me use the word stinks. I don't know, he was allergic to that word. He felt it was like a dirty word, stinks. I don't know, today, there are a lot worse words to use than stinks. But the translation in English that we have in front of us, I don't know if anyone has taken upon themselves to do a more accurate translation.
I think the one that I have is kind of old. It could be that
could be that there's an advanced edition.
There's a new one that's much better.
Yeah, it'd be a gewaldige mitzvah.
No, but the new one,
if it hasn't been done yet. So somebody who's an expert in German. I mean, if you look at German inside out, you know, it's not worth.
I have a
the new
one.
one relies on Hebrew. It doesn't rely on German.
Yeah,
it relies more on the Hebrew translation.
In my class who knows German. So I'm going to ask him to perhaps offer his translation. But in the absence of the original German, I would propose that we learn the Hebrew translation of the German, which you have in these pages. And I compared that to the English one, every single line. You know what? Again, don't quote me on this, but I would go as far as to say that this English translation is like a summary. It's like Roshei Prakim of what Hirsch. He omits sentence after sentence, like a whole bunch of sentences that he skips entirely. from the Hebrew chance.
He's a grandson of Rav Hirsch.
Who?
He was a grandson of Rav Hirsch. The English translator, Levi. Rav Hirsch's daughter married a Levi and they lived in England.
I shouldn't have said what I said. I'm so sorry. He's a grandson of Rav Hirsch.
I'm just saying.
He did not do a good job. He may have known German, but he didn't know English. You know what I'm saying?
I think Rav Roy did other things.
So I'm in a little bit of a bind because I have more time, but I don't want to go overtime. And on the other hand, I don't want to do a botched job on Rav Hirsch because I think it's very, very important. But what I would like to do in the next 2 or 3 minutes, with your permission, is to give you a homework assignment to go through Rav Hirsch. Again, I would strongly recommend the Hebrew, but I'm going to give you a few points that you should emphasize, that you should focus on. And if you would like, I would like next week to continue reading Rav Hirsch in the Hebrew. And there are many, many chidushim and insights into Rav Hirsch. And Rav Hirsch is such a radically different kind of a commentary than everything that we've seen until now. I mean, the Maral is very radical too, but what I see in Rav Hirsch is like the forerunner of a darshan like my father, if you know what I mean. Meaning, Rav Hirsch explicitly analyzes and comments and interprets this parsha in the light of world history. Again, he didn't live through the Shoah, but it's almost as if he was addressing that kind of a situation. He's a darshan first class. It's a whole different kind of approach. I mean, if I put the Ramban on one side and Rav Hirsch on the other, there would be two polar extremes. And as a darshan, Rav Hirsch is very sensitive to the role of the Jewish nation throughout history. And that's what I'd like you to focus on. Who are the Jews? Are they sensitive to anti-Semitism? How do they respond to anti-Semitism? How should they respond to anti-Semitism? And sensitive to the different parshios that are grouped together, one contiguous to the other. So the first part of Vayishlach has to do with Esav in his confrontation with Yaakov. And the second immediate parsha that follows on suit is the parsha of Shechem and Hamor with Dinah, the response of Shimon v'Levi. And it's all about the relationship between the Jewish nation and the other nations. So I'd like to get some response from you, sooner than later. And let me know if you want to continue, because I'd like to take the Rambam, the Ramban, the Maral Prague, and most of all, Rav Shimshon for Hirsch, and see how this could shed a light on the current situation in Gaza. So let me know if you're on board.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And if you are, then I would beseech you to go through Rav Hirsch carefully. I spent hours on this Rav Hirsch. Every paragraph is another insight. And then he weaves it all into Shimon v'Levi on the one hand and Yaakov on the other. Okay, then?
Yeah.
Let me wish you a great week, and we should hear Sorot Tovot.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeshkov.
Thank you.